My name is Christian Rodriguez, and many people know that in the United States, the obesity rates have gone up substantially within the last decade or so. And many people are arguing that the main cause of this is due to high fructose corn syrup. And this is a substitute for sugar that is made artificially in a lab. So somebody who would support that high fructose corn syrup is very bad is a website called the Food and Research Action Center. Actually, sorry, I made a mistake. Dr. Richard Johnson, he says, your body metabolizes fructose in a much different way from glucose. The entire burden of metabolizing fructose falls on your liver. And Dr. Robert Lustig, professor of pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco, says, after eating fructose, 100% of the metabolic burden rests on your liver. But with glucose, your liver has to break down only 20%. And my proposition is that high fructose corn syrup is actually not as bad as these people would argue, and that it does not have such a good impact on the obesity. Well, actually, so the introduction of high fructose corn syrup came to the United States in the late 1970s, and it was produced a lot because it was so cheap, because it's very cheap and it is made, I'm just losing it, I'm sorry.
It's okay, don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
So high fructose corn syrup was created in the lab. It's very cheap, and nowadays it is available in lots of the products we eat. Except in the last 10 years, since 2000, the production of high fructose corn syrup has actually been going down, and the production of sugar has actually been rising again. And this, within the last few years, a good reason why it's starting to go down is because many people believe that high fructose corn syrup is very unhealthy, but in reality, high fructose corn syrup is actually almost composed of the same thing as sugar, and the scientific name for sugar is sucrose. And high fructose corn syrup is pretty much composed of half glucose and half fructose, and sugar is pretty much the same thing. And so many people would argue that in the body, high fructose corn syrup is not metabolized correctly, and it gets people more overweight because it doesn't actually convert to energy but just turns into fat. And so I would argue that the main causes for obesity is actually a combination of technology. People are more into their computers, into their cell phones. People are not outside as much. The availability of fast food is now even higher. Every year, many new fast food restaurants are made at every corner, so if somebody wants some, they can easily just go in their car and go pick some up. And the dailymail.com says that on average we spend 91 minutes a day listening to the radio, while around 80 minutes a day texting, emailing, and social networking. And obviously, about 20 years ago or so, many of the technology we have today wasn't available, so many people weren't able to get away doing things without having to get off their desk. They would actually physically have to go walk around and take care of their business. And something to support my claim is that advancednutrition.org says, although consumption of high fructose corn syrup in the United States dramatically increased from the years 1970s when it first came into the U.S., Until about 1999, or the past decade, the consumption of high fructose corn syrup has decreased, whereas obesity has increased or remained at the same levels in most population groups. Yeah, that would conclude my statement.
All right, Christian, let's start with some of the good things. I think you've got a lot of good information in the speech that, where are you? I know you're over there somewhere. There you are. A lot of good information in the speech that will support the position that you're taking, but the way the material's put together is a little complicated. At the beginning, you have two pieces of testimony that are telling us about how dangerous high fructose corn syrup is. And I'm assuming that the reason you have that in there is to demonstrate that there is, in fact, controversy. However, it sounds like that's the argument that you're going to make, and then suddenly your proposition is going kind of in the opposite direction, and that's a little bit screwy. So there's got to be a way to simplify and clarify that position. Maybe make your claim first, then talk about here's what the argument is on the other side, and then tell us why that argument is wrong. One of the other problems here is you've got two pieces of data that explain, two authorities who are explaining why high fructose corn syrup is processed differently and so on and so forth, and you have nobody on the other side saying the opposite of that. You've got this explanation that says, well, they're basically the same thing, but in the quotes that you had at the beginning of the speech, they explain why it's not basically the same thing. So you really need, if you're going to set that up as the controversy, then that ought to get a counterpunch to it. There ought to be some response to those particular points. All right, so you've got good information in the speech. The biggest problem here is that it's not put together very efficiently. Let's start with the proposition, which has the word not in it in two places, which kind of violates one of those standards we talked about. You want affirmative phrasing of your proposition, you want to avoid the term not, and you've got it in two sections in the very proposition that you're starting to argue. That gets confusing. There's not a layout of what the structure is going to be. Basically, information is kind of driving the way you're presenting this. You don't have claims that you're attaching that information to. In fact, there are a couple of places when you do make a claim and then you present evidence related to that claim, the evidence is in a place completely separate from the original claim, which means that if people are paying close attention, maybe they'll go back and plug it in. But you don't want to make people work that hard. You want to make the argument so it's clear that everybody knows what you're talking about. So the material just needs to be put together a little bit more effectively. I know you're a little bit nervous, but your voice is clear. You're speaking to us pretty effectively. You got the nervous feet. This isn't a public speaking class, so you don't want to worry too much about that. But you do want to think about it. And just remember, these are the same people we're seeing every day. We're all here trying to work together and get better at this. Try not to be nervous. I didn't think that affected your presentation. The structural issues are what affected your presentation. All right, thank you.